Assalamu alaikum. This is neuroanatomy lecture. In this lecture, we will discuss about vestibulocochlear nerve, which is the eighth cranial nerve. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to know different pathways of the vestibulocochlear nerve, auditory pathway, and equilibrium pathway. Uh, then branches, distribution, and its lesions. There are two sets of nuclei that are present in the that are associated with the vestibulocochlear nerve. There is vestibular nuclear complex and other one is the cochlear nuclear complex. The vestibular nuclear complex consists of four nuclei that are present at pontomedullary junction, and they are associated with sense of equilibrium. While cochlear nerve nuclei are two in number, they are present in the inferior cerebellar peduncle and they are associated with the auditory pathway or sense of hearing. The vestibulocochlear nerve has two distinct parts, that is the vestibular nerve and the cochlear nerve, and they leave the brain stem along with the facial nerve, and they travel towards the internal acoustic meatus. Here you can see this is the section of the brain stem. The red line that you can see here, this round oval has been is showing the vestibular nuclear complex that is composed of four nuclei: the superior vestibular nucleus, the lateral, medial, and inferior vestibular nuclei. On the other side, their associations are shown with different parts of the internal ear. The lateral nuclei are associated with the ampullaris part of the semicircular canals, while the lateral is also associated with the utricle, and the saccule is associated with all the nuclei. Here you can see this is the section taken from the middle of the petrous temporal bone, where you can see this is the internal acoustic meatus, the opening. Here you can see there is the opening of the internal acoustic meatus, and in the internal acoustic meatus, the internal ear, the internal acoustic meatus, it leads into the internal ear. Here you can see there are the semicircular canals, the central vestibular portion, and there is cochlear portion. We have discussed now about the vestibular nuclei. This is the vestibular nerve and its ganglia, and this is the vestibule. Here you can see this is a semicircular canal, and this is the ampullar portion of the semicircular canal. The fiber rise from this area and the vestibule. They are carried by this vestibular nerve, and here is the cochlea that is associated with the cochlear nerve. Here you can see this is the membranous labyrinth, showing fibers are going from the ampulla of the Here you can see this is the semicircular canal and this is its ampullar portion. Fibers are going in the vestibular nerve, and this is the utricle. Fibers are going into the vestibular nerve, and this is the saccule. These are the portions of the membranous labyrinth of the internal ear, and they are also going to in the vestibular nerve. Vestibular nerve is associated with the equilibrium and balance of the body, and this is the cochlea. This cochlea is also the membranous part of the internal ear, and this constitute the fibers. They come from the hair cells and they travel towards the spiral ganglion, and from the spiral ganglion they are carried as cochlear nerve, and they both meet to form the vestibulocochlear nerve or the acoustic nerve. These nerve then travel towards the brainstem. This is the bony labyrinth. The previous membranous labyrinth is enclosed in this bony labyrinth. This is the attachment of the vestibulocochlear nerve to the brainstem. Here you can see the arrow is showing the vestibulocochlear nerve, and the other two nerves are the facial nerves. This picture is again showing the how the vestibulocochlear nerve is associated with its nuclei and how the fibers are going towards the higher centers. The vestibular nerve conducts nerve impulses from the utricle and saccule and provide information concerning the position of the head. The nerve also conduct impulses from the semicircular canal that provide information concerning the movement of the head. The nerve fibers of the vestibular nerve are central processes of the nerve cells located in the vestibular ganglion, which is situated in the internal acoustic meatus. They enter the anterior surface of the brainstem in the groove between the lower border of the pons and upper part of the medulla oblongata. When they enter the vestibular nuclear complex, the fibers divide into short ascending and long descending fibers. A small number of fibers pass directly to the cerebellum through inferior cerebellar peduncle, bypassing the vestibular nuclei. Here are the function of the vestibular system. They are concerned with the movement of the head while it changes its position, and they also make it coordinated with the movements of the eye. Then we come to the auditory system that include cochlear nuclei. The cochlear nuclei are present in the inferior cerebellar peduncle. The cochlear nerve conducts nerve impulses concerned with the sound from the organ of Corti in the cochlea that I have just shown you, that includes the hair cells, phalangeal cells, and the tectorial membrane. The fibers of the cochlear nerve are central processes of the cells located in the spiral ganglion of the cochlea. They enter the anterior surface of the brainstem at the lower border of the pons on the lateral side of the emerging facial nerve and are separated from it by vestibular nerve. On entering the pons, the nerve fibers divide one into posterior cochlear nucleus, and they divide to enter into the posterior cochlear nucleus and into the anterior cochlear nucleus. From the cochlear nucleus, they go towards the the trapezoid body and the olivary nucleus. Here they are relayed in the posterior nucleus of the trapezoid body and superior olivary nucleus on the same or the opposite side. The axon now ascend through the posterior part of the pons and midbrain and form tract known as lateral lemniscus. Each lateral lemniscus consists of third order neurons from both sides. These fibers ascend and relay in small groups of nerve cells. They are known as nucleus of lateral lemniscus. On reaching the midbrain, fibers of the lateral lemniscus terminate in the nucleus of inferior colliculus or are relayed in the medial geniculate body and pass to the auditory cortex of the cerebral hemisphere through acoustic radiation of the internal capsule. This is the total auditory pathway. Here you can see this is the neuron fibers relaying in the spiral ganglion. This is the cochlear nuclei, ventral and dorsal cochlear nuclei. This is the area of the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Then they are carried upwards. These are the fourth order neurons. Then there are the fifth order neurons in the medial geniculate body, and from the medial geniculate to the auditory cortex. Auditory cortex is divided into primary auditory cortex and secondary auditory cortex, or the association areas. The primary auditory cortex are the areas 41 and 42, and association areas are 22, 21 and 20. The lesions of the auditory nerve are tested uh, by vibrating tuning fork in the midline on the forehead, and the vibrations are converted, they are perceived by the nerve. Or there is Rhine's test. The vibrating fork is held on the master process until the sound is no longer heard and then quickly transferred to the external acoustic meatus. In normal ear or with nerve deafness, the sound will be heard again, but in conduction deafness, further sound will not be heard. The cool water irrigation caused nystagmus to the opposite side, warm to the same side. The absence of vestibulocochlear reflexes after irrigation with ice cold water is one of the criteria of brain death. By this we come to the end of the vestibulocochlear nerve. Thank you for your attention. Allah Hafiz.